I'm starting over again. This is really weird. I'm actually redoing this first episode. If you already listened to my first episode, which is not up anymore, then you don't really have to listen to this one. I'm kind of going to say the same stuff basically, but the reason why I'm redoing this is because I felt like some of the stuff that I said in that first episode, it might have been a little bit too soon regarding kind of what happened to me. So what I'm going to do is kind of talk more about just me starting over and just about what that feels like. And I'm going to just not share any stories about my previous experience of what happened to me. And again, the reason why is because I just think it's a little bit too close to the incident. And I talked to some wise counsel, and we kind of all felt like maybe it's a little bit too soon to kind of share some of those details. And I didn't really share a lot. I shared some examples of what happened to me, but either way, I decided to redo this episode and not really talk about those things. So starting over for real, a second time. And this is kind of what starting over is like, right? You're launching something, you're starting over, and hey, you feel like maybe this wasn't the best way, or maybe I could do it better. So this is kind of what starting over is all about. You're kind of setting a foundation, setting a tone, and sometimes you make mistakes, or sometimes you got to redo things, or sometimes you just don't feel good about something you put out. So you redo things or you modify things. And so here's the real first episode of this podcast. Starting over is actually different from starting something new, because although they share a lot of similar fears, worries, struggles, challenges, starting over implies that maybe you lost something. Maybe there's something you had and you left it and you have to start over. Starting something new doesn't really imply that you came from something. It's just you're starting something brand new. And of course, there's a lot of the same challenges there. But I'm actually starting over. There was something that I had, I don't have it anymore. And so now I'm going to start this new podcast. And starting over is really scary. You know, there's a reason why I hate moving. I hate moving. I don't want to pack all the boxes. You got to organize everything, and then you move everything into the new place, and then you have to unpack and reorganize everything. I really hate doing that. And starting over is very similar. It's something that's not just difficult, but I hate doing it because you have to go back to zero. You have to go back to nothing and rebuild. And that's kind of like the phase of life that I'm in right now. I'm starting over for two different reasons. And the second reason I'll share with you a little bit later. But I'm starting over because I'm starting over and it's really hard to know what to expect. At the time of recording this podcast, some of you might know I launched a Kickstarter. If it's past January 28th, 2024, then disregard this because obviously the Kickstarter is not in effect anymore. But this is part of the fear and the worry of what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to raise funds, trying to raise support. And that's extremely challenging. It's really hard to kind of put yourself out there like that, to ask your network to support you as you're trying to raise funds for a project, for a company. Some of you guys have been on mission trips, short-term mission trips, things like that, and raising support was really hard. I come from a church planting background, and so I remember trying to raise support for that, and it was very difficult, very difficult. And I'm trying to do that right now as I start over and I'm trying to build not just this podcast, which is one of 4 parts of this creative ministry brand that I'm trying to build and I'm trying to launch. I think for me currently, starting over is really difficult because now I have a family with 3 kids. And you're thinking about providing for them. You're thinking about financial security and just being able to live, right? Rent and food, things like that. And that's probably right now, currently, one of my biggest fears and worries. Can I provide for my family? Is this really going to work? Is this going to be able to sustain some sort of future livable income? Is it going to be consistent? And there's a lot of fears that surround that. There's a lot of fears surrounding just a personal sense of confidence. Can I really do it? There's a little bit of shame in there, right? Because I'm kind of starting from nothing. So building from the ground up, maybe it's a combination of like shame and embarrassment. I don't know. But coming from where I used to come from, where I came from, and now, it's hard to deal with a lot of these emotions. It's a mental game. It's a mental game to try to launch a startup business or a company. And some of you have tried that before. Some of you guys have tried launching, maybe just not a company, but you try to do something. Maybe it was with sports, or maybe it was a ministry. And there's a lot of fear that surrounds that. I think for me, it's compounded even more because this is not just a hobby. This is something that I'm really trying to build. I'm trying to make this work. I'm trying to turn this into something that can sustain my family. As I said, starting over implies that you kind of came from something, you left it, or you lost it, or got, taken away from you. I don't know which one of those situations it is for you, but starting over kind of implies something like that, right? And I think for me, starting over is not only difficult because of unknown expectations and is this going to work and can I actually sustain this financially, but it's really hard because of where I came from. Starting over from something that you used to be a part of and leaving that's really scary. That's really scary. Imagine you working or you had something and it was going well and that was exciting and it was fun and maybe it was even secure or it was getting more secure. And leaving all that to start over is incredibly challenging. That's a huge obstacle to overcome. And I think in our culture, in Asian culture, especially in Korean culture, growing up, that wasn't really encouraged a lot, right? If you grew up here with immigrant parents, starting over and trying to start something new, that wasn't really the common parenting style or parenting guidance that we got. Most of the guidance or most of the upbringing that I had and a lot of my friends had was not to start over, but just to follow suit, right? To do what is expected of you, the pattern. Everyone's doing this pattern, so why stick out? Okay, play it safe. Go to school, do well in school, go to college, go to a good college, study something that's not risky, like medicine or business or engineering, and then don't go into a field of work that's risky, like any creative arts type of field or sports. Just do what is most safe. Starting over or launching something wasn't really the pattern or the options that most of my friends chose. And if you had parents that encouraged you to do that, that's awesome. I think, again, that's rare. So to even hear that from some people it's not just encouraging, but it's like, wow, I can't believe your parents actually supported you in doing that. So as I try to launch this, coming from a background that never really encouraged that, it's incredibly challenging. Trying to build something on your own, there's so much risk to that. And for me, all I do is think about my family and my kids. And so starting with zero from the ground up is a very scary place to be in. I think the last time I ever felt like this was years ago when my wife and I, we tried a church plant. Church planting was probably the closest thing that resembles what I'm doing right now, but definitely the closest thing that I ever experienced in trying to start something brand new. I tried to plant a church, and that was incredibly scary. I remember trying to raise support for that. And not only was it scary to try to ask for support, but it was scary when there was really no support coming in. That's why, like, every time I talk to church planters or someone who's thinking about planting a church, I always tell them, don't do it. But I don't stop there. I always say, don't do it unless you're ready to face probably some of the most challenging times in your life. I mean, the amount of resiliency that you have to try to get into church planting is huge, And I share some of my horror stories from church planting. And I tell them, are you ready for that? If you're ready for that and you think you can do it, then go for it. But just be ready to experience some really low moments in life. Church planting for me was some of the most lowest moments in my life. I remember when I first was sending out support letters, and it wasn't even just for financial support, but it was for prayer support. I was like, hey, can you pray for us? And I remember this number very, very clearly. I sent out about 106 different types of, letters, emails, all these things to people that my wife and I knew back then at that time. And I remember 7 people responded, say they would pray for us. That was really challenging to experience. And I thought about 2 things. Number one, I thought about wow, gosh, I didn't expect that. I thought, more people would at least pray for us. But the second thing I thought about was man, maybe a lot of people don't really like me as much as I thought they did. And that's a real statement. I'm like, man, maybe I wasn't as close with some of these people that I thought, or maybe they didn't really believe in me as I thought they would. And those were real things that I had to think about objectively. It wasn't a subjective thing in my mind. I was objectively thinking whoa, this is kind of a reality check for me. What about my character maybe has put some of these people off? Or what about me and my wheelhouse and my skill set maybe isn't as good as I thought it was? So I objectively had to think through a lot of those things. And as I try to launch this creative ministry brand, a lot of those same thoughts came back to me. A lot of those objective thoughts flooded my mind again. Some of the things that I think about most often, other than can I financially support my family, is number one, am I good enough? Am I good enough to really do this? I'm excited. I feel like this could really work, but am I really good enough to do this? I think about, what if this whole thing fails? What if the Kickstarter doesn't reach the goal? What if I start trying to pump out content and just not a lot of people are subscribing or following? What if this whole thing fails? So just the mental game behind starting over is incredibly challenging. I think currently, as I'm trying to build this ministry brand, there's so much fear and worry that I have that there are days where I just kind of think, maybe I shouldn't have done this. I go back to my safe mode, right? Maybe I should have just gotten a job at some store and just, at least that's like some sort of financial security coming in. Or, I think about currently right now, at the time of recording this, the Kickstarter. I think about, okay, what if I don't reach my goal? And if you don't know, if you don't reach your Kickstarter goal, you get nothing. And I think about, okay, what if I don't reach my goal? And then what would I do after that? Yeah, it's really scary. It's really scary. Not having a consistent monthly income anymore. That's a scary place to be in. I think it's even more scary because I have kids, 3 kids. If it was just my wife and I, gosh, that's doable, right? You could figure something out. But with 3 kids now, it's even more scarier. And some of you listening or watching, some of you experienced that before. Describing the emotion or the feeling is just, it's not the same as actually going through it. Starting over, it's just, you cannot ever know what that feels like unless you have actually done it or doing it right now. I think the pain of leaving or where I came from, that pain is also incredibly challenging. There's so much that happened with that, and it was incredibly difficult. Just the amount of disappointment from that experience. It was very hard to move on. I'm still like moving on from it, like not completely healed. Much better now than before, for sure. Naturally, I worry a lot. That's kind of who I am, my personality. I just worry. I worry all the time. And I know some of you guys are thinking like, oh, aren't you a pastor? You're not supposed to worry. I know, but guess what? I'm a sinner too. So there's a lot of things I struggle with. So I worry a lot. I remember a couple of days ago, I asked my wife, Hannah, like, what if I don't reach the Kickstarter goal? Or what if this thing bombs, And she said something that was very encouraging. She was just like, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. And then we kind of talked about, some of the things that we could do together to make it work. And hearing that was so empowering for me. Of course, it was even more empowering because it's my wife, right? But hearing that was so empowering for me. I have another friend, my friend Steven, who lives in Washington. We grew up together in youth group. Another person who's very encouraging to me. He encourages me so much. And I think when you start something and you're trying to launch something, of course, it's wise and it's good to have friends who give you the truth and they will kind of tell you objectively what they think. And you need to hear that and you need to have friends like that. However, you also need to have people that encourage you. You need to have people that kind of not false encouragement either. Okay, I'm not talking about the people who just want to tell you what you want to hear just to make you feel good. No, these are like real people who are encouraging you. They believe in you. You got to be around those people as well. Because if all you hear are like these objective stats and like the probability of you failing, stuff like that, which again, these are good things to hear. You got to think about those things. But if that's all you hear, then of course it's going to be so hard to try anything new. So you got to have people that encourage you as well. And there's a couple of people that I have in my life right now that are doing that. And it's really helpful for balance. There's this objective side where I got to be discerning and wise, got to really make sure that I can provide for my family. And if I'm going to launch this thing, I got to think about some real things that need to happen for it to launch well. And then you got to have people who believe in you, that are encouraging you, and that think that you really do it, that might even help you with certain tips and wisdom and advice. That's a good balance to have. I'm trying to have that balance. And I feel like I need this side more, this encouraging side more, because naturally I fall on this side, the worry person, the person who's like, this is not going to work, or what if it fails? So you got to have that balance. So maybe some of you listening to this, you have a dream. Maybe some of you have always thought about launching something. And I hope you have those people in your life who are encouraging you, not false encouragement, not just giving you what you want to hear, but they actually believe in you. They're helping you with like thoughts and ideas. I hope you have those people in your life, because without those type of people, then your dream will always stay a dream. So I hope for any of those of you who are listening and who are maybe in the same process right now, I encourage you with that. Fail forward. There is so much that you're going to learn just from trying something and it not working. And failing at that actually could be a stepping stone for you to maybe be successful at your next idea, at the next step. I always remember those stories about all those actors who were about to give up and they finally landed that audition. One of the stories that I remember is Jim from The Office. John Krasinski, he shares a story of how, I think it was like 3 years of him auditioning, trying for stuff. And he was like a busboy at a diner. And it was like year 3. And he was thinking in his head, I'm probably going to give up. And I think like either he called his mom or his mom called him. And I think like that phone call to him, he was thinking, this is it. I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I think it was like the very next day that he got the call back for The Office, for Jim, the character of Jim in The Office. That story is a very vivid story for me. Like to grind for 3 years, to be at the moment of just giving up, and he finally got his break. He finally got his break. I'm not saying that's going to happen to me, and I'm not even saying that's what's going to happen here. It could happen, maybe this fails, and I have to fail like 10 more times before that happens. Who knows? Everyone's story is different. Everyone's story is different. But these are the type of stories that I think are helpful for you to find hope and encouragement, right? That, again, I want to make sure this is clear. There is no guarantee that's going to work, but these are stories that give you the hope to kind of press forward and to keep on going. Right now, I am experiencing something valuable. I'm starting this creative ministry brand, and I'm starting from the ground up. And I am doing something that's, incredibly nerve-wracking, a kickstarter. I'm asking my friends to pledge and support. And I'm going to see what happens. And with all the fear and all the worry and a family to take care of and thinking about what I used to have, that's all compounded in this recipe. And I try my best to have a balanced perspective. I try my best not to allow the fear and worry kind of take over, because I easily do that. I easily allow my fear and worry to take over, to make me think that I'm not good, and to make me think just to give up and to play it safe. And so I try to have a balanced perspective of that. We're going to see where this goes. We're going to see where this goes. And so I said this before, this is kind of one of 4 parts of this creative ministry brand. The podcast is here, where we're going to dive into real stories and issues with the Asian culture and church, and a lot of just bad stories, not to gossip about the church, but these are stories that are important to hear and talk about, because our culture is a very suppressive culture, and we like to silence those things. And I think a lot of us grew up with these painful experiences, and maybe hearing some of these stories on this podcast will help you begin a journey of healing, or even help you find some closure, or hopefully, I hope, for those of you who have stepped away from the church, it will help you to rebuild your relationship with the Lord, to step back into the church and rebuild that trust. Maybe you've had bad experiences, not just with the church, but with leadership. And I hope this podcast can help assist you with some of those past experiences, the pain, the trauma, and things like that. But the brand is also going to have a Bible methods avenue pathway, where I'm going to teach you biblical interpretation, methodologies, and how to read and study the Bible. That's been a passion of mine. And there's a fun part. There's a fun part of the channel, of the brand in the larger sense, where I'm going to be doing K-drama reviews. So you're going to get Korean drama reviews from a pastor. And I'm going to have some fun with that. So that's the entertainment side. That's the fun side. And I think the big one that I have been thinking about for a long time, this has been a passion of mine for a long time, is children's Bible content. And this is the one that's going to take the longest to build. So in the umbrella of the brand, the 4th part, probably the most challenging part, is going to be building a platform that's going to deliver fun Bible content for kids in a fun way, in an exciting way. And of course, for all you parents out there, I'm going to build this in a way where parents can use this content as a platform to get into deeper discussions with your kids. Maybe the video is going to end with some discussion questions. Maybe there's going to be handouts. Maybe there's going to be actual topics that I go over that are very sensitive. They're hard to talk about with your kids. So use the platform as kind of a beginning point, and maybe watch it with your kids, and then talk about some other things with your children. I really believe that this next generation of children especially, their faith is going to be found and built in the home. And I really believe that. And I'm not assuming, nor am I implying, that church doesn't have a part to play. The church has an incredibly huge part to play. And I'm not implying that the church is failing or not doing its job or can't do something. I'm not implying that at all. What I am saying, though, is that the world that we live in today is very different from how many of us grew up in the 70s and 80s. And I think that the home has a larger role to play, a necessary role to play, if we want the faith in our children to be built strong, if we want the relationship that our children have with Jesus to be built well, to be built strong. I think the home has a much, much larger role to play than when we grew up in the 70s and 80s. And so that's part of another reason why I'm building this platform. It's a big dream. It's a lot. And I think I'm going to try my best to go for it. And if you're listening to this for the first time, as I said before, hey, I launched a Kickstarter. The link is in the description below. If you're listening to this and it's after January 28th, 2024, then you don't have to, listen to this part anymore. But I would love your support. We'll love any type of support you can offer. And I would love any kind of support you can offer. And I hope you could join the brand, join the ministry brand as we are trying to build something fun, build something educational, build something inspirational, and build something that I think will hopefully provide hope for some of the listeners here. So as I said in the beginning, starting over right now is difficult for two reasons, because of where I came from, but also because of what has happened. And at the time of recording this video, it's been about 2 months now. But this is the first time in my life that I have ever experienced. It's the first time I ever experienced the current living state that I'm in right now. And what I mean by that is, when I say I'm starting over, I am truly starting over with nothing. And what that means is that 2 months ago, I got laid off from Saddleback Church.